The Wire is an American crime drama television series set and produced in and around Baltimore, Maryland. Created and primarily written by author and former police reporter David Simon. The series was broadcast by the cable network HBO in the United States. The Wire premiered on June 2, 2002, and ended on March 9, 2008, comprising 60 episodes over 5 seasons. Each season of The Wire introduces a different institution in the city of Baltimore and its relationship to law enforcement. In chronological order they are: the illegal drug trade, the seaport system, the city government and bureaucracy, the school system, and the print news media, while continuing on characters, plots from previous seasons. The large cast consists mainly of character actors who are little known for their other roles, as well as numerous guest and recurring appearances by real-life Baltimore and Maryland figures. Simon has said that, despite its presentation as a crime drama, the show is really about the American city, and about how we live together. It's about how institutions have an effect on individuals. Whether one is a cop, a longshoreman, a drug dealer, a politician, a judge or a lawyer, all are ultimately compromised and must contend with whatever institution to which they are committed. The Wire is lauded for its literary thematics, its uncommonly acute exploration of social and political themes, and its realistic portrayal of urban life. Although the show received average ratings throughout its runs, and never won any major television awards, it has since come to be regarded by many critics as one of the greatest television dramas of all time. Production conception: Simon has stated that he originally set out to create a police drama loosely based on the experiences of his writing partner Ed Burns, a former homicide detective. Burns, when working on protracted investigations of violent drug dealers using surveillance technology, had often been frustrated by the bureaucracy of the Baltimore Police Department. Simon saw similarities with his own ordeals as a police reporter for the Baltimore Sun. Simon chose to set the show in Baltimore because of his familiarity with the city. During his time as a writer and producer for the NBC program Homicide: Life on the Street, based on his book Homicide: A Year on the Killing Streets, also set in Baltimore, Simon had come into conflict with NBC network executives who were displeased by the show's pessimism. Simon wanted to avoid a repeat of these conflicts and chose to take The Wire to HBO. Because of their working relationship from the miniseries The Corner, HBO was initially doubtful about including a police drama in its lineup but eventually agreed to produce the pilot episode. Simon approached the mayor of Baltimore, telling him that he wanted to give a bleak portrayal of certain aspects of the city. Simon was welcome to work there again. He hoped the show would change the opinions of some viewers but said that it was unlikely to have an impact on the issues it portrays. Casting: the casting of the show has been praised for avoiding big-name stars and providing character actors who appear natural in their roles. The looks of the cast as a whole have been described as defying TV expectations by presenting a true range of humanity on screen. Most of the cast is African American, consistent with the demographics of Baltimore. The initial cast was assembled through a process of auditions and readings. Lance Reddick received the role of Cedric Daniels after auditioning for several other parts. Michael K. Williams got the part of Omar Little after only a single audition. Several prominent real-life Baltimore figures, including former Maryland Governor Robert L. Ehrlich Jr., Rev. Frank M. Reed III, former police chief, convicted felon, and radio personality Ed Norris, Virginia Delegate Rob Bell, Baltimore Sun reporter and editor David Etlin, Howard County Executive Ken Ullman, and former Mayor Kurt Schmoke have appeared in minor roles despite not being professional actors. Little Melvin Williams, a Baltimore drug lord arrested in the 1980s by an investigation that Ed Burns had been part of, had a recurring role as a deacon beginning in the third season. J. Landsman, a longtime police officer who inspired the character of the same name, played Lieutenant Dennis Mello. Baltimore Police Commander Gary Daddario served as the series' technical advisor for the first 2 seasons and has a recurring role as prosecutor. Gary DiPasquale. Simon shadowed Daddario's shift when researching his book Homicide: A Year on the Killing Streets, and both Daddario and Landsman are subjects of the book. More than a dozen cast members previously appeared on HBO's first hour-long drama Oz. J.D. Williams, Seth Gilliam, Lance Reddick, and Reggie Cathy were featured in very prominent roles in Oz, while a number of other notable stars of The Wire, including Wood Harris, Frankie Faison, John Dooman, Clark Peters, Dominic Lombardozzi, Michael Hyatt, Michael Potts, and Method Man, appeared in at least one episode of Oz. Cast members Eric Dellums, Peter Gerety, Clark Johnson, Clayton LeBoeuf, Tony Lewis, and Callie Thorne also appeared on Homicide: Life on the Street, the earlier and award-winning network television series also based on Simon's book. Lewis appeared on Oz as well. A number of cast members, as well as crew members, also appeared in the preceding HBO miniseries The Corner, including Clark Peters, Reggie Cathy, Lance Reddick, Corey Parker Robinson, Robert F. Chu, Delaney Williams, and Binney Berger. Crew alongside Simon, the show's creator, head writer, showrunner and executive producer. Much of the creative team behind The Wire were alumni of Homicide and Emmy-winning miniseries The Corner. The Corner veteran, Robert F. Colesbury, was executive producer for the first 2 seasons and directed the season 2 finale before dying from complications from heart surgery in 2004. He is credited by the rest of the creative team as having a large creative role for a producer, and Simon credits him for achieving the show's realistic visual feel. He also had a small recurring role as Detective Ray Cole. Colesbury's wife Karen L. Thorson joined him on the production staff. A third producer on The Corner, Nina Kostroff Noble, also stayed with the production staff for The Wire, rounding out the initial 4-person team. Following Colesbury's death, she became the show's second executive producer alongside Simon. Stories for the show were often co-written by Ed Burns, a former Baltimore homicide detective and public school teacher who had worked with Simon on other projects including The Corner. Burns also became a producer on The Wire in the show's 4th season. Other writers for The Wire include 3 acclaimed crime fiction writers from outside of Baltimore: George Pelecanos from Washington, Richard Price from the Bronx, and Dennis Lehane from Boston. Reviewers drew comparisons between Price's works and The Wire even before he joined. In addition to writing, Pelecanos served as a producer for the 3rd season. Pelecanos has commented that he was attracted to the project because of the opportunity to work with Simon. Staff writer Rafael Alvarez penned several episode scripts, as well as the series guidebook The Wire. Truth be told, Alvarez is a colleague of Simon's from The Sun and a Baltimore native with working experience in the Port area. Another city native and independent filmmaker, Joy Lusker, also wrote for the show in each of its first 3 seasons. Baltimore Sun writer and political journalist William F. Zorzi joined the writing staff in the 3rd season and brought a wealth of experience to the show's examination of Baltimore politics. Playwright and television writer, producer Eric Overmyer joined the crew of The Wire in the show's 4th season as a consulting producer and writer. He had also previously worked on Homicide. Overmyer was brought into the full-time production staff to replace Pelecanos, who scaled back his involvement to concentrate on his next book and worked on the 4th season solely as a writer. Emmy Award winner, Homicide and The Corner writer and college friend of Simon, David Mills, also joined the writing staff in the 4th season. Directors include Homicide alumnus Clark Johnson, who directed several acclaimed episodes of The Shield, and Tim Van Patten, an Emmy winner who has worked on every season of The Sopranos. The directing has been praised for its uncomplicated and subtle style. Following the death of Colesbury, Director Joe Chappelle joined the production staff as a co-executive producer and continued to regularly direct episodes. Episode structure when broadcast on HBO and on some international networks. The episodes are preceded by a recap of events that have a bearing upon the upcoming narrative, using clips from previous episodes. Each episode begins with a cold open that seldom contains a dramatic juncture. The screen then fades or cuts to black while the intro music fades in. The show's opening title sequence then plays, a series of shots, mainly close-ups, concerning the show's subject matter that changes from season to season, separated by fast cutting. The opening credits are superimposed on the sequence, and consist only of actors' names without identifying which actors play which roles. In addition, actors' faces are rarely seen in the title sequence. At the end of the sequence, a quotation is shown on screen that is spoken by a character during the episode. The three exceptions were the first season finale, which uses the phrase, "all in the game," attributed to traditional West Baltimore, a phrase used frequently throughout all 5 seasons including that episode. The fourth season finale, which uses words written on boarded-up vacant homes attributed to Baltimore, traditional, and the series finale, which started with a quote from H.L. Mencken that is shown on a wall at the Baltimore Sun in one scene, neither quote being spoken by a character. Progressive story arcs often unfold in different locations at the same time. Episodes rarely end with a cliffhanger, and close with a fade or cut to black with the closing music fading in. Music rather than overlaying songs on the soundtrack, or employing a score. The Wire primarily uses pieces of music that emanate from a source within the scene, such as a jukebox or car radio. This kind of music is known as diegetic or source cue. This practice is rarely breached, notably for the end-of-season montages and occasionally with a brief overlap of the closing theme and the final shot. The opening theme is "Way Down in the Hole," a gospel and blues-inspired song, written by Tom Waits for his 1987 album Frank's Wild Years. Each season uses a different recording and a different opening sequence, with the theme being performed by the Blind Boys of Alabama, Waits, the Neville Brothers, De Major and Steve Earle. The Season 4 version of "Way Down in the Hole" was arranged and recorded for the show and is performed by 5 Baltimore teenagers: Ivan Ashford, Markel Steele, Cameron Brown, Tariq El-Sabir and Avery Bargasser. Earle, who performed the 5th season version, is also a member of the cast, playing the recovering drug addict Wallin. The closing theme is "The Fall," composed by Blake Lay, who is also the music supervisor of the show. During season finales, a song is played before the closing scene in a montage showing the lives of the protagonists in the aftermath of the narrative. The first season montage is played over, step by step, by Jesse Winchester. The second, "I Feel All Right," by Steve Earle. The third, "Fast Train," written by Van Morrison and performed by Solomon Burke. The fourth, "I Walk on Gilded Splinters," written by Dr. John and performed by Paul Weller. And the fifth uses an extended version of "Way Down in the Hole" by the Blind Boys of Alabama, the same version of the song used as the opening theme for the first season. While the songs reflect the mood of the sequence, their lyrics are usually only loosely tied to the visual shots. In the commentary track to episode 37, Mission Accomplished, executive producer David Simon said, "I hate it when somebody purposely tries to have the lyrics match the visual. It brutalizes the visual in a way to have the lyrics dead on point. Yet at the same time, it can't be totally off point. It has to glance at what you're trying to say." Music by the Celtic punk band The Pogues is used throughout the series. The band's song, "The Body of an American," which is always played at detectives' wakes at Kavanaugh's Bar, occurs in 3 episodes. In the episode Dead Soldiers, the song "Sally McLennan" can be heard when Bunk and McNulty are drinking on the street outside Kavanaugh's Bar. The song "Transmetropolitan" is heard in the opening sequence of the episode Duck and Cover during Season 2. where McNulty crashes his car while drunk. 2 soundtrack albums, called The Wire, and All the Pieces Matter, 5 years of music from The Wire and Beyond Amsterdam, were released on January 8, 2008 on Nonesuch Records. The former features music from all 5 seasons of the series and the latter includes local Baltimore artists exclusively. Style. Realism. The writers strove to create a realistic vision of an American city, based on their own experiences. Simon, originally a journalist for the Baltimore Sun, spent a year researching a homicide police department for his book, Homicide: A Year on the Killing Streets, where he met Burns. Burns served in the Baltimore Police Department for 20 years, and later became a teacher in the inner-city school. The two of them spent a year researching the drug culture and poverty in Baltimore for their book, The Corner: A Year in the Life of an Inner-City Neighborhood. Their combined experiences were used in many of the storylines of The Wire. Central to the show's aim for realism was the creation of truthful characters. Simon has stated that most of them are composites of real-life Baltimore figures. For instance, Donnie Andrews served as the main inspiration of Omar Little. Martin O'Malley served as one of the inspirations for Tommy Carcetti. The show often cast non-professional actors in minor roles, distinguishing itself from other television series by showing the faces and voices of the real city it depicts. The writing also uses contemporary slang to enhance the immersive viewing experience. In distinguishing the police characters from other television detectives, Simon makes the point that even the best police of The Wire are motivated not by a desire to protect and serve, but by the intellectual vanity of believing they are smarter than the criminals they are chasing. However, while many of the police do exhibit altruistic qualities, many officers portrayed on the show are incompetent, brutal, self-aggrandizing, or hamstrung by bureaucracy and politics. The criminals are not always motivated by profit or a desire to harm others. Many are trapped in their existence and all have human qualities. Even so, The Wire does not minimize or gloss over the horrific effects of their actions. The show is realistic in depicting the processes of both police work and criminal activity. There have even been reports of real-life criminals watching the show to learn how to counter police investigation techniques. The 5th season portrayed a working newsroom at the Baltimore Sun and has been hailed as the most realistic portrayal of the media in film and television. In December 2006, The Washington Post carried an article in which local African American students stated that the show had hit a nerve with the black community, and that they themselves knew real-life counterparts of many of the characters. The article expressed great sadness at the toll drugs and violence are taking on the black community. Visual novel. Many important events occur off-camera and there is no artificial exposition in the form of voiceover or flashbacks, with the exceptions of 2 flashbacks, one at the end of the pilot episode that replays a moment from earlier in the same episode and one at the end of the 4th season finale that shows a short clip of a character tutoring his younger brother earlier in the season. Thus, the viewer needs to follow every conversation closely to understand the ongoing story arc and the relevance of each character to it. Salon.com has described the show as novelistic in structure, with a greater depth of writing and plotting than other crime shows. Each season of The Wire consists of 10 to 13 full-hour episodes, which form several multi-layered narratives. Simon chose this structure with an eye towards long story arcs that draw a viewer in, which then results in a more satisfying payoff. He uses the metaphor of a visual novel in several interviews, describing each episode as a chapter, and has also commented that this allows a fuller exploration of the show's themes in time not spent on plot development. Social commentary. Simon described the 2nd season as a meditation on the death of work and the betrayal of the American working class. It is a deliberate argument that unencumbered capitalism is not a substitute for social policy, that on its own, without a social compact, Raw capitalism is destined to serve the few at the expense of the many. He added that Season 3 reflects on the nature of reform and reformers, and whether there is any possibility that political processes, long calcified, can mitigate against the forces currently arrayed against individuals. The third season is also an allegory that draws explicit parallels between the Iraq War and drug prohibition, which in Simon's view has failed in its aims and has become a war against America's underclass. This is portrayed by Major Colvin, imparting to Carver his view that policing has been allowed to become a war and thus will never succeed in its aims. Writer Ed Burns, who worked as a public school teacher after retiring from the Baltimore police force shortly before going to work with Simon, has called education the theme of the fourth season, rather than focusing solely on the school system. The fourth season looks at schools as a porous part of the community that are affected by problems outside of their boundaries. Burns states that education comes from many sources other than schools and that children can be educated by other means, including contact with the drug dealers they work for. Burns and Simon see the theme as an opportunity to explore how individuals end up like the show's criminal characters, and to dramatize the notion that hard work is not always justly rewarded.